Hi, I'm Brandon Bowers, pastor of New Life Church, located in Locust, North Carolina. And I wanted to say thanks for stopping by and checking out our YouTube channel. I hope that today's message is both encouraging and challenging to you in your walk with Christ. If you're in our area sometime, we would love to have you come check out one of our services, each and every Sunday at 8:45, 10:15, and 11:45. We'd love to have you come out, and I hope that you enjoy today's message. Good morning. Hey, so how about those Panthers? Huh? Too soon, right? Hey. Anyway, let's put that behind us, right? That was last week. That's history. Looking forward to the next season, right? Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I hope you're having a great day. If there's one thing I would bet on, like I'm not a betting man, but I would be willing to make this bet, and I think I'd be safe in it today. Even though it's Valentine's Day, I'm willing to bet that some of you had an argument on your way to church this morning. Like, that happened. It's like, dang, he already ain't even got started me reading my mail. It happens. Why? Because we have relationships. And because we have these things called relationships, we're going to have conflict. Conflict knows no holiday. Right? It doesn't realize that on Valentine's Day you're not supposed to fuss and fight with your spouse. All through the world, there's conflict. There's division, there's war, there's all the isms, there's racism, partisanism, terrorism, you name it. I mean, we're a divisive people. And because of it, because of conflict, there are broken governments, there are broken homes, there are broken economies, there are broken marriages, there are broken hearts, broken lives. But Jesus says something profound. And one of his famous messages in all of his ministry, Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God." Blessed are the peacemakers. I want you to notice something Jesus didn't say. He didn't say, "Blessed are the peacekeepers." See, there's a difference. There's a difference between peacemakers and peacekeepers. Peacemakers have learned the art of healthy conflict. They realize it's a reality in life, and they know how to deal with it effectively. Peacekeepers are people who have fallen into the destructive trap of thinking they can avoid conflict. Let's just be honest, you can't avoid conflict. There's no way around it. As long as there are relationships in your life, there's going to be conflict. As a matter of fact, there's a book on my shelf in the office. It's on marriage. One of the chapters in this book is titled Preventing Conflict. I've never even read it. Never even had a desire to. And the reason is because I know whatever it says is false. It's impossible. You can't prevent conflict. It's impossible. You can prevent destructive conflict. You can prevent casualties, but you can't prevent conflict. As a matter of fact, the Bible actually says that healthy conflict is a good thing. Like, we need that in our life. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17. Solomon wrote, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Healthy conflict. There's going to be friction. We're going to have disagreements. We don't have to like it, but we do have to face it. I mean, I don't really think that anybody enjoys conflict. I mean, do we enjoy and get something out of having a disagreement, whether it's with a friend or a spouse or whomever? Most of us don't really like it, but we do have to deal with it. I mean, some of the biggest, most macho, burliest men that I've ever seen cower and shrivel in fear and dread at 4 words from the mouth of their wife. We need to talk. It's like kryptonite, man. It breaks them down because we dread conflict. But here's something that I know as well. We're all imperfect people. We live in an imperfect world. And because of that, conflict is likely going to be a part of our everyday life. We best get used to it. And so it would seem to me that if it's a part of our everyday life, then it would be wise of us to find out, discover how can we deal with conflict in an effective, healthy, productive kind of a way. Doesn't that seem to be one of the most important life skills to have? Like, put that in your pocket because you're going to need it. Because it's just a part of life. And there's no place, there's no relationship on earth where this is more evident, where it's more beneficial than marriage. Right? You're going to have conflict in your marriage. It's an unchanging law of nature. Every couple fights. I don't care who they are, how nice they are, how much public display of affection that they show, how many times they try to tell you, we never fight. Every couple fights. And if they say they don't, they liars. Like, don't even hang out with them. They're not good people. You can't trust them. Every couple fights. The difference is some couples, what sets them apart from others, some couples have learned how to fight right. They've learned the art of healthy conflict. You see, when 2 people get married, you got to understand what's going on here. We're bringing together 2 separate opinions, 2 separate life experiences, two separate expectations, different personalities. All these things are just all of a sudden thrown in to the same mix. And it's been described like a married couple are like 2 blocks of granite. In the beginning, all we really see and all we really know about one another is just the surface level beauty, the attractiveness of what's on the surface. But as we begin to go along in marriage, and these 2 blocks begin to cause friction on one another, each person is revealed for who they really are. See, without conflict, without the friction, marriage would just simply become stale and superficial. It's all about the appearance. But with good, healthy conflict, these 2 blocks of granite, these blocks of stone can be molded, shaped, chipped away, and formed into a beautiful statue representing what people are supposed to be and what they're supposed to look like and what marriage is really about. And so what we want to answer today is just simply, how do we learn to fight right? We don't want to have destructive, demeaning arguments in our relationships, whether it's with our spouse or with a friend or a coworker or anybody. How do we learn to fight right? So what I'm going to do fairly quickly today is just give you 4 rules on how to fight right. And again, whether you're married or you apply these at work or with friendship, or it may be as a parent with your children, all of these rules are going to be absolutely applicable and relevant no matter what situation you're in. So 4 rules on how to fight right, how to have healthy conflict. Number 1, fight for something. Fight for something. I want you to put an emphasis on the word for. Fight for something. See, typically we fight about something, about issues, about problems, not for something. We fight about what we think is the problem. We're fighting about the kids. We're fighting over this issue or that issue, over money, over the bills, over the dirty laundry, over the dirty house, or the dishes in the sink, whatever it is. We're fighting about things instead of for something. And that's why these conflicts never find any real conclusion. They just keep happening over and over, recurring. It's like a cycle. We never find a good end to the conflict. It's always a lingering issue, sort of like a dead mouse in the wall. That smell just never seems to go away. It's always there, and it's always coming back to haunt us. We got to find some way to bring it to a conclusion. Well, the Bible says to do that, you need to learn to fight for something instead of just about something. And the Bible reveals that we need to fight for a purpose, not just about a problem. And that purpose is reconciliation. So when we come in conflict, whether it's with our spouse or a friend or a neighbor or whoever, we need to fight for the reconciliation of the relationship, not simply about a problem. See, the problem that we've found and the reason we end up fighting about problems instead of for a purpose is every single one of us in here, all of our life, we've been taught, falsely, but we've been taught to fight not for reconciliation, but for resolution. See, here's the problem with that. At the root of the word resolution is resolve. We've been taught that you have to resolve every problem. You have to resolve every issue. Here's a news flash. You can't do that. That's absolutely impossible. You're never going to resolve every disagreement because we're different. We're all different. We're never going to see eye to eye on every single issue. And that's okay. It's okay to disagree as long as you're not disagreeable. Right? To be able to disagree and not be disagreeable, that's what we call maturity. That's wisdom. That's being Christ-like. Paul talked about it in these terms. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18. He says, God has done all of this, and He has restored our relationship with Him through Christ, and has given us this ministry of restoring relationships. Other translations say He's given us the ministry of reconciliation. In other words, God was using Christ to restore His relationship with humanity. He didn't hold people's faults against them, and He's given us this message of restored relationships to tell others. Therefore, we are Christ's representatives. See, by fighting for something instead of simply about something, we find that we can have unity without uniformity. We don't always have to see eye to eye. We can walk hand in hand without seeing eye to eye. March the 20th this year, Jessica and I will be married 12 years. It's not as long as some of you, but longer than others. 12 years. And over the last 12 years, let me tell you, there's been plenty of things we've found to disagree with each other about. And to this day, there are still certain issues that we likely don't see eye to eye on. But here's the thing. We stay together. We can still support each other because we're at peace. We're not always waging war and trying to resolve things that just may never be resolved. She and I, we've discovered, now we're still learning, we're still practicing at this, but we're discovering that when we disagree, when we're in conflict, that the ultimate goal is not really to win or to be right, but it's to reconcile the relationship. Listen, that's a hard lesson to learn, especially if you're me, because I can be hard to live with. I'm hard-headed. But it's not about winning, and it's not about being right. It's about restoring and reconciling the relationship. So that's rule number one. Fight for something. Fight for reconciliation. Number two, when you fight, keep it above the belt. Right? Keep it above the belt. Right? Let's go at this in a fair and straightforward way. Rick Warren, he's a well-known pastor of Saddleback Church out in California. He's been often quoted as saying, hurt people hurt people. If you found that to be true, hurt people hurt people. See, like I said, we think we argue over ideas, over differences of opinion. We're fighting over issues, but in reality, we're arguing, we fight in and out of and over emotions. Somebody said something. Somebody did something that hurt somebody's feelings. Somebody felt like they were being ignored, they were being insulted, they were being slighted or taken advantage of. And because of those hurt feelings, the temptation is simply to lash out, to return insult for insult, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, right? That's where we naturally go. If you hurt me, then I'm going to hurt you. And the more you hurt me, the more I'm going to hurt you. And all that does is just simply prolong the conflict, worsens the situation. And sometimes it's going to inflict injury that's going to last for a lifetime. It's going to be hard to recover from that. So I've even heard people like try to rationalize and excuse that kind of behavior by saying, it's just the kind of person I am. I'm a tell it like it is kind of person. If you hurt me, you wrong me, you take advantage or insult me, then I'm just going to tell you like it is. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind, whatever. Listen, let's just be straight. We're being honest here this morning. That's just called being rude. You're just rude. You're a jerk. You're a butthole. Don't do that. Right? Don't do that. If you think you have to resort to cursing, to insulting, to demeaning, or saying hurtful things, or taking hurtful action to get your point across, you're an idiot. You're nowhere near a mature human being. And like, I know what you're thinking. You said don't say hurtful things. Now you call me an idiot. Well, that's not my words. That's actually what God called you. He says that. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18. Listen to this. He said, reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. What's the opposite of being wise? Being an idiot. Being foolish. The tongue of the wise brings healing. So those who are fools only use hurtful words. All right? Paul wrote something similar in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. He said, don't use harmful words, but only helpful words. The kind that build up and provide what's needed so that what you say will do good to those who hear you. Here's what we need to remember. You're never helpful when you're hurtful. You're never persuasive when you're abrasive. And you're never a blessing when you're just blasting. Keep it above the belt. You want to avoid hurting someone. You want to avoid kicking them while they're down and adding insult to insult in an effort to win or to get them to see and to do things your way. Really, all you need to do is just switch your focus. Just switch how you're looking at the situation. Start confessing your part of the problem, what you did to add to the issue or to the conflict. Start trying to see things from their perspective. Start listening. Start listening to them and where they're hurting, what they're trying to say. James chapter 1, verse 19 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. We need to do much more listening, much less speaking. And that's going to avoid us getting into even greater or even more heated conflicts. Paul said it like this in Philippians. We read this last week, chapter 2, in verse 4 and 5. He said, each one of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interest of others. And your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. If you want to keep it above the belt and avoid hurting someone, he says all you need to do is look. You just need to look. Open your eyes and look. Observe. Switch your focus. Start looking to their needs. That word look in Philippians there is the Greek word skopos. It means to focus. To look intently at something. It's where we get our word microscope or telescope. And Paul followed that, verse 5, by saying, you need to have the same kind of attitude that Jesus had. And you put those two things together, and what Paul is teaching us is simply this. We look most like Christ. And we are in the best position to reconcile a relationship when we're looking to someone else's needs and to someone else's hurts rather than our own. All we need to do is look. All we need to do is look. So fight for something. Keep it above the belt. Don't fight dirty, And then number 3, worry about you. Worry about you. Man, I can't tell you how many couples that I've counseled with How many husbands and wives that I've sat down in my office or wherever, maybe even the living room of their home, and said, listen, your marriage will not begin to improve until you stop trying to change them and you start changing you. Worry about you. Like, what's your problem? Where do you need to improve? What have you done to inflame the situation? I realize that this problem may be 99.9999% their fault. But the reality is you can always find something to confess. It doesn't matter what the argument is about. You can always find something that you can confess, something that you need to do to change or to improve. One of my professors in Bible college, he would say this quite often. He said, guys, I don't care where you go, where the Lord takes you, where you live, how big or how small your house is, one room you're always going to have is room for improvement. Well, all of us need to change in some way. So we just need to confess that. Maybe it was a poor response. Even if that response was, hey, I was just trying to defend myself. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe it was the attitude in which you did it. Or perhaps it was the way that you walked away or just walked out of the house and made him or her feel like you just weren't listening, or what they were saying wasn't important, and you just weren't interested. Maybe it was those poor responses. See, we all have weaknesses in our life. Weaknesses that everybody else sees very clearly. They're obvious, but we have yet to see. They're called blind spots. We're clueless about them. We don't even know they're there. And it's a good thing that every once in a while conflict comes along, because it gives us the opportunity to recognize our own faults and to do something about them. See, Jesus said it like this in Matthew chapter 7, verse 3. He said, why worry about the speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend or your spouse, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, when you can't see past the log in your own? You got a blind spot. You hypocrite. First get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. See, what Jesus is saying here is, confess your part of the conflict first. Worry about you first. What's that piece of wood in your eye that's keeping you from seeing the situation clearly? That's preventing you from working toward reconciliation, from bringing unity to the relationship or unity to the marriage. He's saying it's okay there in the end. It's okay for there to be confrontation, but you can't start the conversation with pointing out their faults, what they did wrong, and how they hurt you, or what they said, or how they came up short. You worry about you. What's your part of the issue? Where did you contribute? Confess that. Resolve to deal with that. I'm going to change that. And then you start moving towards the next step. So like right now, if there's a recent conflict between you and your spouse, you and a friend or a coworker, just begin to ask yourself, how did I contribute to that situation? Was it that I was being insensitive? Maybe I was being overly sensitive. Like I just sometimes take things a little too seriously that I just really shouldn't. Was I being overbearing? Was I being unreasonable? Was I being a little too demanding? Was I inconsiderate? What are my blind spots? Where do I need to improve? Do something about those. When you figure out what those are and you confess them and you start working on those, then you're ready to take this fourth and final step in fighting right. How to deal with conflict helpfully. And that is let God change them. Let God change them. You worry about you. You focus on the changes and the improvements that you need to make to yourself, and you let God change them. Leave them in His hands. It's not that God doesn't use other people to help change us and to help make improvements in our life. But just here's what I found. Typically, if a wife begins to point out the flaws and faults in her husband, he interprets that as nagging. You're just griping on me. And if he does that to her, then she feels he's being insensitive, he's being abrasive, he's being harsh. I mean, am I right? Of course I'm right. Like, I wasn't married yesterday. I know I'm right. And that's why I think Peter and Paul, they sort of got together and they said, we need to write something about this. We need to deal with this. Peter wrote something to the wives, and Paul, he says, I'll take on the guys. Peter wrote this to the wives, and in the context, he's talking to wives of unbelieving husbands who are not of the faith. We're just going to broaden the scope to say, wives of husbands who need to change. That's what he's talking about. In 1 Peter 3, verse 1, he says, wives, in the same way, be submissive to your husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word. You ever said anything to your husband, he just didn't believe it? Like, you need to change. You really need to check that attitude. Not me. You just do this. Yeah. I know it's true. If any of them do not believe the word, that they may be won over without words. Don't need the nagging. Don't need the griping. By the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. And then Paul, he takes the guys to the woodshed in Ephesians chapter 5. I told you to read that last week. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25 through 27, he says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. He did this to change her, to change the church. Listen, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain, without wrinkle, or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. This is valuable stuff, guys. If you want her to change, listen, this is something I'm learning as well. We don't need to fuss. We don't need to fight. We don't need to be sensitive. We don't need to be harsh. We don't need to be abrasive. We simply need to love her. And by doing that, she'll change. And ladies, if you need him to change, you want some things in him to change, it's not going to happen with you griping at him, nagging him. You simply need to find a way to express respect for him. That's God's word. You either believe it's true or it's not. Trust God to change them. Here's something, I love this verse. Paul, he wrote this in Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. He says, being confident of this. He says, I am absolutely sure, 100%, not a doubt in my mind, I'm confident of this, that he who began a good work in you, we can change that around, he who began a good work in them will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ. He also wrote in Romans chapter 8, verse 29, that those who God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son. Here's the question we need to ask ourselves. Are you confident? Are you confident in God's ability to conform, to change your husband, your spouse, your friend, your children, your parents, your coworkers? Are you confident in God's ability to conform them, change them into the image or the likeness of Jesus himself? Can God do that? Absolutely. He who began that work will complete it, because that's his purpose. See, he created us. God created us. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows our spouse better than we know our spouse. He knows his or her potential and purpose and lot in life. And God knows, like if there's something in them that needs to change, he's fully aware of it. It hasn't escaped his notice at all. He's fully aware of it, and he also knows that it's his job. It's his job to change them, because he's the one said he'd do the work. I'll change them. What you need to do is trust me. Pray for that person. Pray for my spouse. Pray for my coworker, my friend, my parents, whoever. Pray for them and model before them the behavior you want to see in and out of them. Like, this isn't an exhaustive list of how to handle and deal with conflict in a healthy way, but I think it's a great way to get started, don't you? I mean, we could add so many other things to it, but gosh, if we could just get these 4 things, if we could abide by these 4 rules, we would find conflict in life, it would go much smoother. It would be much more beneficial. Far fewer scars and bruises. Be, way less maimed people, maimed relationships walking around. If we just learn how to fight right, how to fight and have conflict without causing casualty. And what we've looked at this morning, fight for something. Fight for reconciliation. Keep it above the belt. Fight clean. No need to use harsh words. No need to demean or degrade anybody. Worry about you. Like, what can I do? Where can I improve? And let God change them. That's how you do it. It's a biblical approach to healthy conflict. And so here's where I just want to end this morning. I want to be just straight and transparent with you. Listen, these things, these rules, these principles are helpful for anyone. But truthfully, if you don't have a relationship with Christ, you're going to find it very difficult to apply them. Because not only are you going to be, trying to force them into a situation that's already sort of complicated and heated, and you're fighting against someone else, you're in conflict with someone else, but without Christ, you're going to be in conflict with yourself, with your own flesh. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to win. And you're going to turn and you're going to fight dirty. You're going to return insult for insult. You're going to injure someone. You're going to cause mass casualty. You're going to inflict injury that likely will last a lifetime. You need Christ in your life. You need to surrender your life to Him. Surrender your heart, your emotion, everything about you to Him. And then begin to apply the principles of His Word to your life and to your relationships.